The question of free will, the capacity to choose between different courses of action, has haunted philosophical discourse for millennia. It is a question that strikes at the very core of our understanding of self, responsibility, and the nature of reality. Are we the authors of our own destinies, or are we merely puppets dancing to the tune of predetermined causes? While the subjective experience of making choices strongly suggests the former, compelling arguments and scientific findings challenge this intuitive notion, leaving us grappling with a profound and perhaps ultimately unanswerable puzzle. One of the most potent challenges to free will comes from the perspective of determinism. This view posits that all events, including human actions, are causally determined by prior events and the laws of nature. If every action is the inevitable consequence of a chain of cause and effect stretching back to the beginning of time, then how can we claim to be truly free in our choices? Determinism paints a picture of a universe governed by unyielding laws, leaving no room for genuine alternative possibilities. Our sense of agency, from this perspective, becomes a mere illusion, a byproduct of complex causal processes unfolding within our brains. Reinforcing the deterministic viewpoint are certain findings in neuroscience. Studies have suggested that brain activity associated with the decision can be detected even before the individual is consciously aware of having made that decision. This raises troubling questions about the role of conscious will in our actions. If our brains have already decided before we are even aware of it, does this not undermine the very notion of free will? While the interpretation of these studies remains a subject of debate, they undeniably provide further ammunition for those who argue against the existence of free will. However, the case for free will is not without its strengths. Perhaps the most compelling argument stems from our own subjective experience. We deliberate, we weigh options, we feel the weight of responsibility for our choices. This sense of agency is deeply ingrained in our consciousness and forms the basis of our moral and social interactions. We hold ourselves and others accountable for their actions, a practice that would be meaningless if free will were merely an illusion. Moral responsibility, the idea that we are deserving of praise or blame for our actions, seems inextricably linked to the belief in free will. Without it, the foundations of our ethical systems would crumble. Furthermore, many religious and ethical traditions rely heavily on the concept of free will. The notions of sin, redemption, and moral progress presuppose that individuals have the capacity to choose between good and evil. While these arguments do not constitute scientific proof, they highlight the profound implications of denying free will, not only for our individual lives, but also for the fabric of society. Attempts to reconcile free will and determinism, such as compatibilism, offer potential pathways out of this philosophical impasse. Compatibilists argue that free will is compatible with determinism as long as our actions are caused by our own desires and beliefs, even if those desires and beliefs are themselves determined. This perspective seeks to redefine free will not as the ability to transcend causal laws, but rather as the capacity to act in accordance with our own internal states. Ultimately, the question of free will remains one of the most enduring and perplexing philosophical puzzles. Despite centuries of debate and the advances of science, we are no closer to a definitive answer. The tension between our subjective experience of freedom and the deterministic implications of science continues to fuel the debate. Perhaps in the end, the question of free will is not one that can be definitively answered, but rather a question that forces us to confront the fundamental nature of consciousness, causality, and what it means to be human.